Welcome everyone. The webinar will begin shortly and will be recorded. Connect with the campaign for grade level reading on social media. On Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR. On Twitter, follow the account Reading by Third, and follow us on LinkedIn at Campaign for GLR. Please use hashtag Learning Tuesdays and tag us to tweet anything you learn from today's webinar, and we'll be sure to retweet. We encourage you to share your questions, reflections, and observations on social media. Once again, we would love to connect. So on Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR. On Twitter, follow the account Reading by Third, and follow us on LinkedIn at Campaign for GLR. Okay, welcome again everyone to today's webinar. My name is Sierra Sanchez, and I'll be behind the scenes helping to produce this conversation. I have just a few housekeeping details before we get started. First, we would love for you to introduce yourself. So please use the chat box at the bottom of the screen to share your name, city, or state, and your organization. When responding, be sure to select both panelists and attendees so that we all know who is here. All attendees are in listen-only mode, but we encourage you to post any questions that you may have during the conversation into the Q&A box. This webinar is being recorded and live streamed on our Facebook page, and a link to the recording will be emailed on Friday to all who registered. And all resources that you see shared as links in the chat will also be compiled and shared in that same follow-up email to all webinar registrants. Finally, we'll be posting a brief on-screen evaluation during closing and highly encourage you to respond. This helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement. Additionally, I would like to call your attention to our upcoming GLR Learning Tuesdays webinars. Next week on June 28th, we invite you to join us at 3 p.m. for a session on Ready for Children, Seamless Transitions into Kindergarten. The following week on July 5th, we'll be hosting two special rebroadcast conversations. The first on early school success, and the second at 3 p.m. on Starting Early, State Investments that Support Children's Language and Literacy Development. And finally, on July 14th, we invite you to join us at 12:30 for a Crucible of Practice Salon on book access, getting the books, and so much more. Finally, before we begin, I would like to call your attention to save the date for GLR Week 2022. This will be from July 18th to the 22nd, and we hope to see you there. We'll be having multiple plenary sessions as well as many state-led events, and we hope you can join us. Registration and information will be in the chat box, and a save the date will be coming soon to your inbox. Joining you now is Senior Consultant with the campaign, Becky Miles-Poca. Thank you and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you, Sierra, and thanks to all of you for joining us today for what we hope and have planned for will be a terrific conversation. And, we know that the relationship between state departments of education and local districts can at times be fraught with a myriad of emotions and sometimes deep frustrations. But under the best of circumstances, it can serve districts in a way that builds capacity to serve students and families in our local communities. And today, we're going to hear from two such exemplars and how they have leveraged new and existing resources to strengthen local capacity. We will also hear from our colleague at the Council of Chief State School Officers and learn more about what the national landscape is looking like. So it's now my honor to introduce our moderator for today, Ed.D. Chang. And Hetty is a colleague and she's a dear friend, and she's deeply committed to promoting a two-generation solutions to achieving a more just and equitable society. And Hetty has spent more than 3 decades working in the fields of family support, family economic success, education, and child development. She is the founder and executive director of Attendance Works, a national and state level initiative aimed at advancing student success by addressing chronic absence. And for many of you who don't know, chronic absence wasn't even on the national radar as even just a little more than a decade ago. And now it's part of our everyday nomenclature and what we all are tracking across our country. In February of 2013, Hetty was named by the White House as a champion of change for her commitment to furthering African-American education. Hetty is recognized as a highly valued partner by many national organizations, state education agencies, local districts, and certainly by us here at the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Hetty, it's my honor to hand the baton to you.
Thank you so much, Becky. It's truly an honor to be here as part of this session that is really exploring how do we make durable investments in ensuring early school success. And this is more critical than ever. You know, it's clear that it's going to take years to recover from COVID. And making sure that we can engage in that recovery really requires having states and localities that can work together to put in place those pieces that have to exist within school and outside of school, so we can have that comprehensive approach to moving the needle on 3rd grade reading, early numeracy. And this session gives us a chance to really explore how that is possible. And I am so thrilled to be joined by leaders in 2 states where we've had the privilege of working over the years. We're going to be starting off with Superintendent Carey Wright and with Gulfport Superintendent Glenn East. Appointed State Superintendent of Mississippi in 2013, Dr. Wright has a remarkable track record. Under her leadership, Mississippi has initiated successful education reforms that have increased literacy skills in pre-K through grade 3, pushed student achievement on the National Assessment of Educational Progress to improve at a faster rate than nearly all other states, and achieved a higher graduation rate than the national average. Now, no superintendent works alone. This is a true partnership, right? To see Carey, and I know that Glenn East, who's the superintendent of Gulfport and has been there for a number of years, and also serves on the State Department of Education, the State Board of Education, has been such a critical partner for her. So we're going to start off, and I'll actually talk about our other panelists for a second and then come back to you guys with Mississippi telling their story. And they'll be focusing a lot on building teacher capacity. Then we're going to be joined by 2 other presenters, or 3 other presenters, if we go to the next slide. And it's my privilege to welcome Commissioner Charlene Russell-Tucker and Stanford Superintendent Tamu Lucero. Prior to her appointment as commissioner in August 2021, Charlene held virtually every leadership position in her agency. She has played an essential and critical role in advancing Connecticut's groundbreaking work around family and community engagement, school attendance, and school discipline, all with an incredibly deep focus on equity. And Commissioner Russell-Tucker is joined by Superintendent Tamu Lucero of Stamford, Connecticut, who also brings in her 25 years of district leadership as a district leader and administrator both in Connecticut and Ohio. And again, this work is so critical. It's that interplay between state policy, local investment, and innovation at every level that we're going to hear about that today. And after we hear from our two states, we're going to have the privilege of hearing from Melissa McGrath, Chief of Staff for the Council of State School Officers. Her role at CCSSO is to keep her pulse on the key work across the organization and advise senior leadership whenever there are critical changes in the educational policy landscape. I'm sure that Melissa has been busier than ever watching what's happening across our country and in these two states in particular. So with that, let me welcome back Superintendent Wright and Superintendent East from Mississippi. Carey, can you start off by giving us a sense of why has building teacher capacity been such a critical strategy for improving early learning for Mississippi?
Sure.
And let's go to the next slide after this.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. Well, this is where we were in 2013 when I arrived here in Mississippi. And, quality counts had literally given us an F. We were literally 50th in the nation for K-12 achievement. Our graduation rate was hovering around 75.5%. When NAEP came out, we were more than one full grade level below the average. And there was a huge honesty gap here between what the state assessment was saying in terms of proficiency and what our NAEP results. So we knew we needed to really lean in hard on building teacher and leader capacity. Next slide. So this is where we are today. And because of our strategy, I'm firmly of belief that that's why we are now ranked as a C- with quality counts. We are now 35th in the nation. We are no longer 50th. And there's this old saying in the South that used to be, thank God for Mississippi, meaning nobody had to worry about being last because we always were. And we're not. We are now ranked 35th. Our graduation rate's the highest it's ever been. It's at 88.4. And when the 2019 results came out of NAEP, we were #1 in the nation for our gains for 4th grade reading and 4th grade math. And the other part that I think is really important by our results, Mississippi has the highest rate of poverty in the nation, and our students in poverty outperformed their counterparts, be they African American, Hispanic, or white. And for the past 3 years, and that includes during COVID, Mississippi has been ranked the second most improved state in the nation for 3 consecutive years. So we knew we needed to lean in heavily with building teacher capacity. Next slide. We had several strategies that we went about. Obviously, we had to reorganize the department because it needed some reorganizing. Our standards had been rated as horrific. And so we adopted brand new, very rigorous standards. And then we developed brand new assessments that were aligned to those standards, because the last thing I wanted to do was get off the front page of being the poster child for the honesty gap. I wanted to make sure that when we were assessing and reporting those results, as we do with our accountability model, that our data were accurate, they were transparent, and transparent to all. But last but not least, we leaned in very heavily as a state on building teacher and leader capacity through professional development. And I will talk about that as we move through, but I can tell you that that is something that had not been occurring, but we really felt strongly that our teachers needed to have their skills built. And so that's what we've been doing since then. Next slide. Glenn, I think you want to talk a little bit about this one.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Dr. Wright. And again, thank you for inviting me to be here this afternoon. One of the things that as Dr. Wright and her team began to pull the state together, our joke around the Gulfport School District is we expect a first-year teacher to have 20 years of experience. So that power of professional development, the legislature got behind that, the whole concept of rebuilding or providing strong professional development to help our teachers grow as quickly as possible was monumental in our changes. Since then, we've got mathematics coaches all across the state. They're going in and helping with day-to-day lesson plans to how to teach, how to problem solve, how to do things all across the state of Mississippi, which helps us tremendously. And then also early learning was taking a beating in our state. And I don't why. And all of a sudden it opened up, and then those funds became appropriate. appropriated. And so schools begin to show that, yes, early learning was providing stronger readers, stronger problem solvers in mathematics as they entered the regular school environment, the K-12 environment, if you will. And that tremendously helped move school districts forward. And I think took away some of the doubt about what we could do as a state moving forward, just because those 4-year-olds were getting some experience before they went into the kindergarten program. And then, of course, we, you know, in the 3rd grade in Mississippi, if you don't pass that state test, then you'll be retained or have to have a good cause exemption for moving forward. And the amount of doing that work plus the outside resources that came with the Literacy-Based Promotion Act helped tremendously. One of the things I like is the family guide that we give out across our district that has every grade level talking about what you can do at home to help children learn.
So Glenn and Carey, these are investments that you already had in place before COVID, correct?
With the two that Glenn's talking about, the Early Learning Collaborative Act, yes, and the Literacy-Based Promotion Act, yes. But when we started the Early Learning Collaborative Act, we only had $3 million. So we weren't impacting. So we started collecting data, and I changed the kindergarten enrollment form to say to parents, tell me where your children were as 4-year-olds. And then when the kindergarten readiness data came out, I could disaggregate that data based on where they were to know which programs were doing well and which ones needed help. But because of our results and the children coming out of these collaboratives are outperforming all other children coming into kindergarten. So the legislature has recognized that, and this year not only appropriated 16 million, but they've also appropriated an additional 20 million on top of that so that we can continue to expand that, because they're seeing the results of how effective our Early Learning Collaborative Act is. And the other part I wanted just to tag on with Glenn, it was from the Literacy-Based Promotion Act that we hired all of our literacy coaches. And that was a decision that we made. We did not give the money to the districts. And I know Glenn as a superintendent probably at the time was probably asking why not. But as a state chief, I felt I needed to have control over the quality of these people because they're going to be out working and building the capacity of our teachers. So we have, since that 2013, when those 2 acts were passed, we have been hiring literacy coaches now to go out, work with teachers, do demonstration lessons, develop a literacy plan for the school if it's needed, help them interpret their data. And that coaching model, that the ability to support our teachers and build their capacity to teach reading, the science of reading, I want to say, has really made a big difference.
I want to dovetail right into that. At the local level, we even have our local daycares where our children are in the 3 and 4-year-old programs. They're asking us every year, where did we land as a group going into kindergarten? So that power that started at the state level, at the local level, increased. The word competition is probably a wrong word to use, but there's an awareness in every one of our daycares that are outside our system of where are our children when they begin kindergarten. They want to know that so they can work in the 4-year-old programs in our local school district. Powerful stuff.
Next slide.
This is one that I'm very interested in. We actually piloted the Mississippi Teacher Residency concept, where we were bringing in teachers who had 2 years basically of student teaching type experience. They came in, they had earned their hours in freshman and sophomore year. We had them mentor with teachers in our school district, and the success rate of that 20-year teacher only being a first-year teacher, you know what I'm saying, began to increase. So those teachers have come out more trained, better prepared on how to teach, the art of teaching, but also in working with relationships with students. So since then, again, Mississippi has adopted its own program and put about $9.8 million into the same concept, where a student teacher will work 2 years, have a strong mentor, and graduate into this field. Jackson State, Mississippi State, University of Southern Mississippi, and William Carey, all 5 of them have been so committed to making sure that these young people are successful. And I say young people loosely. We've got some retired military folks that try to come into this program and help. So an outstanding program, proving that really that 2 years of working with that mentor greatly prepares them for the classroom at the end of the day.
There is a question that I think is connected to this, asking how have the teacher ed programs in your state been supportive of these PDs?
Very much so. This conversation really probably began with some of them in the teacher ed programs in our state. The contract process of which schools would do this, there's probably some little pushback in certain areas, but at the end of the day, they saw the advantage of what we were doing by providing that strong mentor teacher over that 2-year period. So there's been a great deal of support, a lot of hand holding between universities and colleges to make this work. So I think they're on board.
Next slide, please. Hetty, you had also wanted us to talk a little about how our ESSER investments, and I think this is something that we really did this in response to, we put together an initiative 2 years ago during COVID called Mississippi Connects. And with that, we purchased almost 400,000 devices to give every teacher and every student a device so that which they did not have before. But that was like step one. So then step two, the teachers were asking for digital content. They needed support where this was concerned. We also, which is down here on the slide, you'll also see digital learning coaches. So our coaching model, which has been a strong strategy for us in supporting and building capacity. We've got coaches in literacy, math, early childhood, special education, school improvement, data analysis, and now digital learning. And they're all out to help teachers. So our digital learning coaches are helping teachers know how to use these devices instructionally in the classroom. So we've purchased a lot of digital content that we gave to the districts for free in math, ELA, social studies, science, and in SEL. We also purchased a high dosage tutoring program for K-12 with our ESSER money that is available 24/7, and it hooks them up with a live tutor. It's not a texting system. It is actually somebody that they can get to know quite well.
And I'm gonna jump in right there if you'll let me.
Yeah.
I left a high school summer school class today where two of the young ladies were so impressed with our 24/7 tutoring. And the reason they were is these two actually were going to summer school in the morning, getting out, having to work that shift to help support their families, and they were able to come in the evening and be able to do that tutoring at their time and in their place. Absolutely powerful stuff is that 24/7 tutoring.
Okay, next slide. So if you kind of look at our professional development strategy, it's kind of like in 3 buckets, if you will. I just mentioned all of our coaches that we continue to hire. So that I need to be very clear. They're hired by the department, but they're deployed based on where the data say they need to be deployed. We've developed an awful lot of online learning, particularly during the COVID era, because the teachers were just, I have a teacher advisory of about 400 teachers. And every time I was meeting with them during this time, they were saying, oh my gosh, we need more help, we need more help, we need more help. And so when we purchased all of those devices, we also purchased training from Fried Technology, Apple, Microsoft, and Canvas, because some of the teachers were saying, I don't know how to use these LMS systems. So that we provided that. And now we've obviously gone back to our in-person, as well as keeping our virtual sessions, but we offer a tremendous amount of professional development around the state. Next slide.
Before you go on, Carrie, someone's asked about the tutoring. It's called PAPER, P-A-P-E-R. So you've got that information to move forward. That was in the chat box. So PAPER, P-A-P-E-R, all capital letters.
Yep. And they've been a great partner. I got to say, they've been a great partner. This is just a sample of our professional development catalog. There's a QR code. I mean, you'll obviously get the deck, but this will give you an idea of the vast amounts of professional development that's offered every year. Next slide. And the one thing that we've done a lot with was with our literacy. Obviously, as I said, we were the last in the nation. We were way behind on NAEP. And so we developed a number of strategies to support teachers. Obviously, the letters training, which is about the science of reading with our K-3 teachers, both special ed, general ed, and our administrators. And we also invited, somebody asked about our ed prep, we also invited all of our institutions of higher learning. We invited the professors to our professional development so that they could see what their candidates were going to be expected to do as of day one. We continue to provide regional literacy professional development, literacy coaching, obviously. We've also got tons of resources. So I'm going to say this, I say this every time I speak. Please go to our website, find something that you can use, take Mississippi's name off of it, put your state's name on it and use it. Because there's, reinventing the wheel drove me crazy as a principal and a teacher. So I just want you to know, we're all in this for the same reason. And that's to make our teachers the best they can be, to make our students the best that they can be. So we have got so many resources really right now on our website for educators and parents. We also had the REL Southeast do a mini study because I was wanting to see, was I seeing in the classroom what we were offering with professional development? So they brought a team of their team from Florida State in and videotaped hundreds of teachers, and then went back and analyzed all this and said, oh my gosh, you're going to love what we found. Teachers are saying, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm so much stronger teacher, of reading now that I have gone through this training, and you're actually seeing it in the classroom. And we now require, it's dyslexia awareness training, but it is required to build a 4-hour awareness of how to recognize dyslexia. What is dyslexia? So once again, if you're a teacher that's coming out of a general ed program, you may not have had enough of that. And so we want to make sure that you are feeling supported in that area as we move through. Next slide. For our teachers also, we have created a website called the Mississippi Instructional Materials.org. And that was done in partnership with Mississippi First. And so teachers were looking for high quality materials, and we wanted them to have confidence in the materials that they were pulling from the internet. So we created this website, and we keep updating it in all those content areas. So now teachers know that if they need a lesson, or they need an idea, or they need resources, they can go right to this website. And they can pull it down, making sure that it's developmentally appropriate for their students and can move forward. Next
One of the
slide.
things that I want to add there is,
Yeah.
and it's not even on the deck, but the superintendent's teacher advisory group and how they can ask her questions about what's going on, but also the conversations they have between each other about instruction from all parts of the state. Education is about relationships, and knowing that a teacher from Gulfport is talking to a teacher from Meridian or Tupelo or Hernando, and they're having the same issues possibly, but also can share solutions for those issues that might be different. So that's another piece where that quality instructional program comes into our state. And I will guarantee you that at the local level, the little app here we have for the instruction materials is one of the most powerful things, and a getting point for sure for solving those educational problems in the classroom.
Yeah, Glenn, I'm glad you mentioned that, because the teachers have really formed great relationships with each other across the state. And so they know now, they've got each other's contact information, and it really does help them share what works for them. And they're very vocal, and I love that. And they're very vocal about what it is that they need. So we've been trying to be very responsive and listening to that voice, because I just view that as our job. And I think our last slide just kind of gives you some ideas. This is, we really push the whole idea around becoming a national board certified teacher in Mississippi. And we have, as you can see at the bottom right now, we've got over 4,500, and we've got another 2,500 that are studying as we speak. The state legislature gives them an additional $6,000 for the life of the certificate. And there are 13 counties that we have designated as really needing strong teachers. So if they decide to go there and teach, they will get another $4,000 annually added onto their salary. We recognize them not only at our board, but we recognize them by giving them a 5-year state license renewal process rather than the annual one. And also, universities are frequently providing graduate credit to teachers that pursue the national board certification. The teachers will tell you it's probably one of the most robust pieces of professional development that they go through, but they form their own tight little network too, which is really good. So they can ask each other questions that they need. But I just, in summary, I think I just can't emphasize enough how much of a strategy that building teacher capacity has been for us. And I can tell you from the emails that I get from teachers and on calls with them, how very appreciative that they are that we're taking this approach and just not assuming that they know everything that they need to know. And so we just go at it by saying, here's all the ways that we can help you, and just let us know how else we can help you get better at your craft.
So Carey and Glenn, I have one easy, quick question and one bigger question, hopefully. The first one is when teachers benefit from a scholarship or from the National Board Certification, is there any requirement that they stay in Mississippi?
No, ma'am.
Or-
No.
And then the second question is, can you say a little bit more about how you see this investment being sustained over time? ESSER dollars are going to be, you know, they're a one-time investment for right now. And so how are you seeing the combination of this leading to sustained and durable change?
That's a really good question. I work very, very closely with our legislature, and they are very data-driven people. And so when I go to talk about the money that's needed for education, I talk in terms of return on investment, and that resonates with the business people that are in the legislature. For example, Literacy-Based Promotion Act, they give us $15 million every year. So each year that I go back to ask, before I even ask for money, I start out with, you gave me $15 million for Literacy-Based Promotion Act. Here's your return on investment. And I show them the data. So then when I say, now I'm asking for another 2,000 or 1,000, whatever it is, they can see what I've done and what the state has done, and people like Glenn East and his staff have done with the money in producing student outcomes. And so they've been, just like we saw in early childhood, when we started with $3 million, I was like, oh my gosh, at $3 million a pop, we were never going to get there. But when I showed them the data, then the next year it went up, and the next year it went up, and it's just continued to go up every single year. And so I think if you can show them that their return on investment is working, they'll continue to invest in it. And we realize that the ESSER dollars are not going to be there, but even with the teacher residency program, which was what, 9.8, that's not a lot of money to give the state 200 teachers every 2 years. And so to me, it's a good purchase, if you will. Now, there's going to be other things that they may not see the value in, but I think that's where teacher voice is going to come into play, because I think teachers are going to have to say, wait a minute, this has really been invaluable, and here's why. So I think it's more than just the state. It's going to be people like Glenn, it's other superintendents that are going to be saying, look, this is something that we need to continue to support. But the legislature for the past 2 years, we've had an excess in our budget. And so they honestly have said, when I meet with them, what else do we need what else do you need? And it was last year that I said, we need math coaches. And they said, okay, then they appropriated money for math coaches, and came back this year and appropriated money for math coaches. So as long as and we collect all the data. So whoever the superintendent is that's coming in next is going to have to be prepared then to go and talk about return on investment, because that's what they want to hear. Because apparently before I got here, all they heard was, we need more money, we need more money, we need more money, but they weren't seeing the outcomes. And now that we've been able to demonstrate the outcomes based on our strategies, they're a lot more willing then to provide the funds that we need.
I'll also say, Hetty, at the local level, there's 26 of us in South Mississippi. We've already trying to begin to pool our resources together financially to do things into the future, and also build from what we're doing. So you've got the power of 26 superintendents and the dollars that they can contribute for more professional development and training for teachers and also administrators. So that conversation gets to the local level and it's spread like wildfire. So it's a good process at this point.
Thank you so much. And I'm trusting that the two of you are going to stay on board. We're going to shift for a moment to the tale of another state. And the data piece is a perfect segue into how we want to think about the work and the amazing contributions also of the Connecticut State Department of Education. So Charlene and Tamu, I so appreciate your joining us. Let's go to the next slide. We'd love to hear, how have you been thinking about this work from the Connecticut perspective, both from investments in literacy, but also your comprehensive investments in data, attendance, and family engagement? Charlene, please.
Thank you, Hetty, and it's a pleasure to be here with you again, and Dr. Wright and colleague, and my colleague here in Connecticut is joining as well, Dr. Tamu Lucera, for us to have this conversation. So I'm really thrilled to be here. And as I was listening to Carey, and you're correct that this is the perfect segue, which will take us to the next slide, please. because here really, you can move to the next. In Connecticut, we'll talk about our data-driven policymaking. And the 4 things I want to talk about here, and first of all, is the access to data. For us, we've always said everything starts and ends with data, or you can call it information. Because if you don't have that, it's like Carey was talking about, how do you get supports for further investment, or how do you know what problems you're solving? You could very well end up with a solution in search of a problem. And so the bottom line is, what is the data? What is it telling us? And it's not just about us at the agency or our districts having the data and information. It's about making it available and transparently available, which is the first thing we're talking about here. And I encourage everyone to go to our EdSite data portal because it's been spiffed up. It's awesome. A lot of data visualizations that's there. This is our interactive education data portal, showcases our commitment to transparency and data-informed policymaking. The recent upgrades offered new dashboards, new visualizations, interactivity on topics such as educator diversity, school choice, college enrollment, persistence, graduation. It's all there, and we're always working to make sure it is up to date. And so we'll talk about data specifically on attendance, but I wanted to start there, for those in the audience that don't know, Ed.D, we've been working together now for well over a decade, trying to crack this issue on student attendance. And so when the pandemic came, we tracked both school attendance by learning models in schools about being hybrid, fully remote, or in person. And that really told us a lot. But we were able to, on a monthly basis, be able to understand and to see into what's happening around student engagement and attendance so that we could do real-time interventions and support our districts, from the state level in what needed to happen, targeting attendance and engagement supports across the state, and not just really leaving the burden on our districts by themselves to try to solve this this data. And so what we also did in this 2 years ago was we assessed our students. And although it was challenging and it was controversial in some cases because we know our kids were going through so much, it wasn't about keeping the adults, accountability for the adults, but we just needed to know the impact on learning for students. And what you see here on the slide is that what we found out from the data, that we learned that students who learned in person, they lost the least ground academically. And so it really bolstered our efforts when we went into the 21-22 school year to say, listen, not just for us, we're talking about family engagement as well, talking to families, encouraging for schools to be open and for families to feel confident in making that their students could be learning in person. The other thing that I wanted to share that we've done here, leveraging federal dollars or ESSER dollars, is to start what is a first of its kind collaborative to really evaluate. Carey was talking about evaluating and return on investment, the efficacy of our investments of the COVID-19 federal relief funding. So we formed as COVID-19 Education Research Collaborative, acronym is CSER, that is actually doing that work. It's a collaborative of private and public universities and colleges in our state. So they are working together in new ways. And we really determine the research agenda, right? And they are able to do that. One great point. So a year ago, we used our federal dollars, $8 million for summer enrichment. The collaborative were able to then do research and evaluation on that investment. And we were able to take that immediate response that we received, what we learned, to put into this year's planning for this summer that is rolling out this summer. So it has really been great to really be focused on the data to drive our policy decisions. The other next slide that you can pull forward, again, we're talking about literacy and early learning. And so I just have a little bit of information here that we can share. And I actually see some of the nexus to what Mississippi is doing. But I am thrilled. This is a busy day for me because this morning we were out doing a big announcement on the Science of Reading Masterclass that we just really unveiled today. This announcement gives our districts cutting edge knowledge about the science of reading so that they can build structures and support systems for instruction. And that's another leveraging of over $4 million of our ESSER dollars our state set aside dollars for this particular effort as well. There's some other pieces of information here on literacy. Recon. This is legislation that allows us to increase teachers' expertise in identifying, providing instruction in foundational reading, spotting where the gaps are, monitoring progress, and also working with families. The same is true about our partnership for literacy success that we've done in a summer reading challenge. Again, very connected to our literacy efforts. And listening to Mississippi again is that this past session, 2 sessions ago, they legislated 2 offices in our agency, the Center for Literacy Research and Reading Success and the Office of Dyslexia and Reading Disabilities. So you can see that there's a real effort here, not just from the legislature, but also from our agency and our districts as well regarding literacy efforts. However, in the next slide, none of these things will give us the outcome that you're looking for if students are not present. They have to be present and engaged in order to learn. And our long-term commitment to attendance, what you're looking at here since 2012, that we literally in Connecticut, we're connecting chronic absence information and collecting that data. And our connection with Ed.D started and attendance works back then. And what you see, and we were making really good progress. And what you see on the slides are the actual numbers of students, because I look at these are students and not just data points. And so I try sometimes not to do percentages. We have over 500,000 students in our state. So now you can do the calculation. But the bottom line is that you can see the story that's being told when you get to 2020, 2021, and where we are to date. So really important for us as we're talking about starting early to understand where we are. And the next slide. So, when we started this work, we were getting kind of the end of year data around attendance. And with the new data collections that we're doing now monthly, we're able to see on a monthly basis the data, the impact on students. And then we're able to, I call it in real time, really provide supports and provide interventions. And we are doing that, a community of practice, identifying the student groups that are missing too much school and targeting for a comprehensive approach. And as I said, Hetty's been so much a part of this work that she could probably do our data slides.
Well, Charlene, I would just add, the one thing I've been so impressed by Connecticut is you not only produce the data statewide, but if folks go on that site, you'll see it's available at each school district level. And the state's actually presenting data reports that encourage each one of their districts to notice in real time which kids are struggling the most and then take action. And so the increases that you were starting to see some improvements. I want to also say I don't see in every place. Some places actually seen increases since during like the Omicron period. But I think it's really important that you as a state have both helped to collect that data, but make sure that everyone's using it.
That's correct. And that's about, again, it is about knowing where our families are, knowing what's happening for students, and making sure we have a holistic approach about working through these issues. And we'll talk about some of our interventions in a minute. The next slide, and certainly I want to ask, Tamu if she wanted to add here, because at the district level, so we're doing this at the statewide level, but also the great work on the ground is also happening in our districts. And again, this is the early grades, and we know the concern that's there. What you're looking at is pre-pandemic numbers, what happened in 2021 and April year to date that we're looking at. And you can see the concerns that we have at the early grades, at kindergarten. And so some of our initiatives are really targeted at the younger grades specifically because we know how important that is. So I will pause there, Hetty, just to see if Tamu just want to jump in and add her voice to this issue of data transparency and attendance, and how at the local level, what we're doing here at the state level is helping to inform their efforts there. Tamu?
Yeah, I was just laughing because we just pulled some data today because we're doing our end of the year reports and we're trying to see where we made some good gains. We are doing a lot of work here in Stanford about around the science of reading. So it's so great to hear other school districts are really deep in this work, because I know that this is the direction we're moving in Stanford and have been for the last 4 years. We started out as a very simple pilot program, because what is very interesting that I don't know that a lot of people realize is that in most universities across the country, teachers may have 1 or 2 reading courses that they have before they leave college. And that's concerning, right? Because they are not understanding really all of the things that go into the development of a child's brain and how they learn to read. And so we know a lot of the development of the brain happens before they ever enter kindergarten. And so we know that the work that we need to do has to not only be work that we do when our teachers are starting with our students in kindergarten, but the collaboration that we have with our pre-K programs that would help us to provide them with professional development, which we do a year-long professional development with our community partners who have our students after school. Our pre-K programs, we have a great relationship where our pre-K teachers and our kindergarten teachers come together several times during the year to have conversations about what they're seeing and what we're thinking about in terms of our data. We're actually hosting one in August for our teachers to come together. So having this data ready and available to us on our website with the state makes it so much easier for us to do our work. We are not digging in, because that's what is complicated about having data, right? You have to dig in and figure out where it is, when it's just someplace literally that I went and clicked 2 buttons this morning and I was able to compare our chronic absentee rate for all of our subgroups with the state and be able to help people understand that, wow, we're keeping pace with the state right now, which, is really important for us. And it allows us to see ourselves in a realistic way and not get so upset if our number doesn't look exactly what we want it to look like right now. So this has been the data that we have been able to use to make data-driven decisions, especially during COVID. It's been very complicated figuring out what's the next step, what are the things that are going to be needed, what are the collaborations that we want to have through our parent university, where we provide our parents with some guidance as to some of the things that they can be doing at home and help them to understand the importance of their children coming to school every day. I know this is data that I got off of attendance work. When you miss 2 days of school, just 2 days of school in 1 month, it is very complicated, because you think, okay, I don't go to school on Wednesday. I think because I don't feel well. Well, if I stay home on Thursday, well, I might as well keep them home on Friday. And we always say to the parents, no. You need to send your child back to school as soon as their fever breaks, as soon as they're feeling better, because that 3rd day makes all the difference in the world. So just all of the resources and having the state supporting us in such a very specific way that we're able to get access to it. And not just us, our parents getting access to this information is really important too.
And I'll just jump in again, Hetty, and I know you have other questions, but just listen to what Tamu said. It's making sure, that's why this information being accessible and available is just so awesome. I met with a group of community leaders who for the first time, didn't realize that they had the power of this information at their fingertips. And so as they're working in housing or whatever sector that they're working on in the community, they're able to see, we're in the, for example, Stanford, we're in Stanford, and they can look and see the data there. I think it better position them to support the district and support families wherever they are.
So helpful, and I agree that transparent data is what helps your local school officials, but also their community partners think about how you target and allocate resources. And I also think one of the things that happens is when you invest in these data systems tends to be upfront investments, but then the results and benefits you get to enjoy for a long time after those upfront investments are paid for. Can you tell us a little bit more about sort of your comprehensive approach to supporting attendance and family and student engagement?
So thank you, Hetty, and you can go to the next slide, and we list some things here that really been important for us, as the summer enrichment opportunities that I talked about right after folks were coming out of the first, full year and a half or so of COVID, I think was so important. As students, families, this was kids were learning remotely for the most part. And 2020, 2021, and it was now, okay, the summer, and what do we do? And how do we start thinking about getting kids back in school? Summer enrichment was a great way to plan for that to happen. And this is where we invested our $8 million for 35 programs across the state, over 100,000 kids that were able to get back into the track, becomes kind of the runway of, getting back together, addressing social emotional development. And so start thinking about and sowing the seeds for being able to go back to school. And so that was really, really an important strategy. The next, again, using our data, was the Learning Engagement and Attendance Program, funded by, through the governor's fund, relief funding. And this shows, again, we have education funding here for education, but when you have the data as we do, that we're able to have conversation across the state, but also with our leadership. And so our governor really, really stood up, and I'm so grateful to say, let's invest a program into that is going to, help to move us forward. And the LEAP program, which is the acronym for that, utilizing home visiting to re-engage students and families with their school communities.
Commissioner, can I speak a little bit about that in Stanford?
Sure,
Because
absolutely.
I have to jump in because it has made a true difference for us. We had a core group of students that really struggled with getting to school. And I think we did a really good job of getting most kids to school on a regular basis. But when we returned to school, everyone in school, there was a small amount of our students who just couldn't do it. And there were many reasons for that. And so we turned to some of our community partners who agreed through this LEAP grant, which without it, I don't know that we would have been able to implement something like this, that they were able to go out to homes and have conversations that maybe they weren't comfortable having with the school, because sometimes it was as simple as this. Because of COVID, we weren't able to get that extra paycheck that we're used to getting. And so we didn't have shoes, or we didn't have clean clothes. And so we were able to partner then with our community partners to help solve that issue. And because it wasn't something that they were ever going to tell a school, that I don't have money to wash my clothes, we were able to send out people that they trusted from our community-based organization, from their after-school programs. And because of that, it was something so simple that we were able to get them money to pay for their laundry. And then they were able to come to school the next day. And it made all the difference in the world. And without that LEAP grant, I don't think that we would have ever thought that during COVID, we could start something like this. So our Here to Help program, which is a program set up for our students to, whatever the need is, here, call this number or email this email address and tell us what the issue is. We will reach out to you, or our community partner will reach out to you, and we will figure out what the next steps are. And again, sometimes it's something that is so small that really isn't an academic-based thing, but it's a need. It is money for housing. There are all kinds of supports that come out of this Here to Help program that was really a collaboration that we put together with our LEAP program. So we can't be more thankful to the state for that assistance.
And you just demonstrated what I mentioned earlier, not to be overlooked, is that you could have determined, if you didn't get that close to what you're trying to solve, you could have planned all kinds of other solutions. That, in my mind, is a solution in search of a problem. Here you were able to find out exactly what it is you're needing to solve, so you could meet that need. And that is really, really so critically important. And even the fact that So this year we just unveiled is $12 million for our summer enrichment program. And I don't take the attitude as if you build it, they'll come. We want to make sure that families know how to connect with these programs that are across the state. So using that same example and using the LEAP program, home visitors will be able to connect families directly to programs that may be available for them for the summer, for enrichment, for learning, and just for having fun. So we're just really thrilled. And I know, Hetty, you're a part of the community of practice and the work that that's happening with LEAP. So I know you can always jump in that space as
Actually,
well.
Charlene, so appreciate, can you take a couple minutes to summarize all these key strategies? And then I want to, we'll leave once Dr. Lucero can add in a comment, and then we actually want to have a chance to also turn to CCSSO to give a context for how this fits with what's happening nationally. And then we're going to open up for Q&A broadly, but I want to keep us moving.
So absolutely, thank you. As you can tell, we can talk about this like for a very long time because we're so passionate about it. The issue of, in investing our dollars, we had 5 investment priorities that's guiding our investments here in the state for all our COVID dollars. Family and community connection is one of those funding priorities, and across the state, I'm so proud, over $70 million that all our districts combined are invested in this particular priority area as well. We work not in isolation with our Office of Early Childhood, so we collaborate with our other state agencies. Technology, we know, is a big deal. Again, back to the governor's office. Being able to invest in making sure that devices and connectivity, another issue we can talk about, broadband connectivity for families, and not to mention social emotional supports, another investment priority. Districts across the state are investing over $183 million in that particular category. And of course, our community partners, none of this can happen without those strong partnerships that are so critical for all the work that we need to do. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. Dr. Lucero, before we end with Connecticut, any other last thoughts about how, or we'll have Q&A later, but for the moment, thoughts about how this intersects with what you do locally to ensure sustainable change?
I think prior to COVID, it was really, we had just introduced a family and community engagement department in our school district. And I think that people questioned it, like, well, why do you need a family? It isn't that everyone's work. But once we went into COVID, I think that it has blossomed into the go-to place, the voice of our families, our voice of our students who demanded a voice during COVID. This was an opportunity for us to deal with true issues that we were hearing out in the community and figuring out how we're all going to be partners in education, that when you look at early grade literacy, we want to make sure that parents understand their role, that the teachers understand their role, and both are supported through really good professional development, how our community-based organization, our after-school program, all of us play a role in early grade reading. And the only way we're going to solve it is through true family and community engagement. So I do think that it was a lesson learned during COVID that this department that we created thinking this is exactly what we need really became the go-to place for everyone as we start to think about all of our roles in educating children.
And I'm hearing that some of the sustainability is about those partnerships that you create, as well as how you're spending your resources.
Yeah, because the resources aren't going to be there forever. So at the local level, they need to start realizing this is what we need to have in place so that all children are getting a quality educational experience. And if our parents are saying that, our community-based organizations are saying that, and now our local stakeholders are saying it, think about the power in that.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask Melissa McGrath to please join us and give us a little context. How does what we're hearing from Mississippi and from Connecticut connect to what you see nationally?
Thanks, Hetty. I really appreciate it. And first, just want to say how motivated I am to be a part of this conversation. Just have all the respect in the world for Dr. Wright and Commissioner Russell Tucker. And so thanks for allowing me to be a part of the conversation, as well as with our esteemed district leaders on the call today. I I first just want to start by, I think we've heard the term ESSER numerous times, and I'm sure everyone on this call is very familiar with it. But Congress has passed multiple COVID relief packages, and ESSER really is the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, the major portion of those funds that went directly to K-12 schools. And so like the states and school districts are dealing with numerous different COVID relief packages, but ESSER funds are really the ones that are most directly used by K-12 school districts. And just for context setting here, ESSER really delineates about 90% of the funds that go directly to school districts and 10% of the funds that could be reserved at the state education agency. So SEA is really under the federal law, and as it was written by Congress, have a very limited role in what they can oversee and how that 90% is spent by local school districts. But states really do have still a very important role that they can play in the effective and equitable use of those funds, as well as the overall recovery and the pandemic, as I think you've seen really demonstrated here by the examples from Mississippi and from Connecticut. And so on the next slide, we really at CCSSO have outlined different ways in which we believe a state education agency can play an important role in pandemic recovery. So these are just some of the ways, and I think this will be a little bit repetitive of what you've heard really talked about on the call, but number one, just setting a statewide vision, building consensus, aligning priorities, and measuring progress. Another one is encouraging the adoption and implementation of evidence-based practices, particularly by investing in research and evaluation. The third one is really about building local capacity and providing guidance to LEAs and other in schools. And then leveraging economies of scale has been really important in a number of states, particularly when you think about schools and districts in more rural and remote communities that don't have as many resources, even with the influx of federal funding. Another one is really about securing an equitable recovery by leveraging data and the use of data to ensure that resources and interventions target students who have been most impacted by the pandemic. And the last one, which doesn't get as much attention, but we spend a lot of time here at CCSSO talking about, is facilitating the federal grants management process, which is really a key relationship between states and local education agencies. And I will not spend a ton of time on that for this audience. But on the next slide, I really want to talk about what we've talked a lot about here today, which is particularly about how we are seeing state education agencies using federal COVID relief funds, and particularly ESSER funds, when they are encouraging and catalyzing local efforts to support early literacy and reading, as well as other early education efforts that we know are so important today. So particularly when it comes to setting a vision, we're seeing a number of states articulate that clear vision. You saw Dr. Wright do that. You saw Commissioner Tucker do that as they went through. They have different visions, but both of those visions are very clear. And you've seen other states set forth their visions of how they expect the resources to be used, as well as how they see the targeted activities aligning with what they were doing pre-pandemic, particularly in using that for a data-driven decision. And then following through with key metrics along the way to make sure they're monitoring the progress and make sure that interventions are working. Another one is expanding access to high quality professional development and instructional materials. We've seen a number of states invest in this area, particularly through their ESSER funds. And you also saw Dr. Wright highlight that in particular. Another one is investing in transition programs for rising kindergartners. We saw both presenters talk about this, but as we know, many young children missed out on in-person learning opportunities they otherwise would have had if the pandemic had not occurred. And so a number of states are really investing in those, getting those students caught up on summer programming or a transitional kindergarten opportunity or something else that will help them experience that. Another one is equipping school leaders to engage families of young students. I think Connecticut spent a lot of time on this and showcased a lot of ways in which different states are going about and supporting school districts on different ways to engage young students and families. The other one is providing training in schools to ensure the effective use of data. I think both states spoke to this, and Connecticut showed a number of examples of the ways that they're using data effectively. We've also seen a number of other states implement different tools and resources on this. And I think the next two that I'm going to talk about are really important to the conversation today. Leveraging state resources to pilot and scale innovative programs. I think Dr. Wright talked about this quite a bit, which is the return on investment. So as LEAs in schools test new learning models or pilot new learning models and programs to accelerate student learning, we know that states are piloting these new strategies as well, or they're scaling these models. They're helping evaluate what's working and what's not. And then they're planning to take some of those strategies to scale. And then related to that is the bullet point below, which is building an evidence base to secure sustainable funding. And we saw Dr. Wright talk about that quite a bit. And we know that's on the top of mind for other state leaders as well, is what evidence base will they have in 2024 when some of this funding does expire, and how will they be able to make the case to sustain this funding, whether it's making the case at the federal level or at the state level to sustain some of these programs in the long term. And last but not least, it's really about knitting together state and local initiatives. And we saw through both presentations, and we're seeing this across the country, how many states are looking to braid and blend federal funds, both the ESSER funds as well as other title funding, with state funds that already exist, and working really closely with governors and with state legislatures to make sure that there may be matching funds at the state level, or there may be other opportunities when they implement a program, that there may be state funding, or they're building on an existing program, such as a Grow Your Own program. Or in Mississippi, Dr. Wright talked a lot about the collaboratives that were already in place for early learning. And so we've seen a lot of those types of programs that also can ensure a durable sustainability going forward. That's a really quick snapshot and a broad overview of what's happening across the country when it comes to ESSER, particularly related to early literacy. One thing I did want to call out, just because I know we have Dr. Wright on the call today, is just that we have seen states have collectively invested more than $120 million in ESSER funding, in training, on letters training, and the science and reading. And that's on top of local investments. And I wanted to call that out because while Dr. Wright did not invent the science of reading, she's been a pioneer in the science of reading and its implementation across the country since she took office as the state superintendent in Mississippi. And we see this as just a really important legacy of her leadership in the country, that so many states are investing and choosing to invest this money in letters training and in the science of reading going forward. And just want to thank her for her continued leadership on the science of reading.
Thank you so much, Melissa. That is a fabulous overview that captures in so many different ways the kinds of investments. I'm going to ask all of our panelists to turn on their videos and open up, and we can have a conversation. And I thought I would start with a question that was asked actually while Mississippi was speaking, but I think might be worth asking. What kind of data do you need to have that will really make the case that you've got a return on investment and help to ensure that more ongoing durable support from your legislature or from your local districts? When you think about, what are those examples of where you've been able to really use data to make that case? What comes to mind?
So several things. Number one, we really try to focus a lot on student outcomes. Let's be very clear. And so with our kindergarten readiness assessment that's administered at the beginning of the year, that gives us and at the end of the year, but it gives us an idea of, I'm going to call it the quality of the little product that's coming through the door as kindergartners, to know where they are academically. And now that we've been able to disaggregate that, we're able to really point out where the strong programs are and then further sustain that. With the literacy money, we have also been following those schools that we've assigned coaches to. So we follow their assessment data and we publish their assessment data so that they actually can see the differences that the coaches are making in student outcomes. And I think that is something that we do continually. We keep data on the number of teachers that come to our professional development, whether it is in person or virtual. And we talk about that as well. Anytime that we've got data that's coming out that supports the efforts that we're trying to do, such as the teacher residency program, that and lets them know, put it in context for them, because I think some people are really good at taking a look at our assessment data, if you will, or whatever data is that we're putting out, and understand that attendance data is something else. And, I remember the whole conversation when we first started having this conversation around average daily attendance and average daily membership. And so many people confuse average daily attendance because it's usually high, because it's a dipstick on any given point in time. And I remember a conversation that I had with this one superintendent, because he was showing his high school had chronic absenteeism rate, which was self-reported by him, of about 52%. And I called him, he called me and he said, your data's wrong. And I said, what are you talking about? And he goes, no, my ADA is at 96%. And I said, well, your ADA may be at 96%, but your chronic absentee rate is at 52% for that high school. And he said, well, where'd you get that data? And I said, from you. You are the one that reported it. So we've used data to really educate too, that no, there's a difference between ADA and chronic absenteeism. And so people have really started paying closer attention to the data once we publish it. We're very transparent. Glenn can tell you, we are very transparent with our data, good or bad. I'll give you another example. When we first put out the kindergarten data, you were either in our collaboratives, another public pre-K that wasn't a collaborative, a private pre-K, Head Start, daycare, or at home. And the only difference between the children that were in Head Start and those children that were kept at home was 1 point. That was it. So it was almost as if these kids had spent all this year, the whole year at home, were doing as well as the kids that had spent a full year in Head Start. And Head Start wasn't happy when we produced that data, but it made them have to reflect on what kind of programming are they providing based on what we're expecting our kindergartners to know and be able to do when they come into kindergarten. So we're working on using data to change behavior. We're working on data to make sure that it's driving the behaviors that you want. Take your accountability model, for example. Tons of data inside the accountability model, and accountability drives the behaviors that you want to see. So if you want more proficient children, you want more growth from them in ELA and math, you want a higher graduation rate, you want more kids in advanced placement, more kids in dual enrollment, then those are the data that we share. And we share it by district and by school so that everybody is aware of what's happening across the state. And I think and we don't do it in a finger pointing exercise. Data is not a finger pointing exercise. Data draws light to areas where you need to continue if things are going really well, or areas where you need to improve if things are not going well. And so those are things, Hetty, just off the top of my head. Glenn, you might have others.
I agree 100%. And the key word is transparency. There is nothing we do data-wise that doesn't go all over the community, to parents, to community leaders, to state leaders, and so on and so forth. Like Connecticut, attendance, closing that achievement gap, all of that data is there for everyone to see and ask questions about. It's powerful, powerful stuff that moves us forward. And then we go for the legislature, there's no argument. They've heard it in their local communities because we've spread it across there as local superintendents. They've heard it from the state level from Dr. Wright and her team. So there's no doubting what the data says in our state at this point.
And we've got a very robust data dashboard on the state website. I mean, you can go on our state website by district, by school, by year, and find a ton of information out about the schools and the students and what's happening around the state. And I think the more you can be transparent, the more it builds a level of trust than when you are asking for something or trying to explain why we're doing something. There's a trust level that's been built up because we're not hiding anything. It's not like we're only showing the good data. If the data's not good, then it's shown, whether it's us or the districts or whatever, doesn't make any difference. We've got to be truthful with our communities and our families.
I want to see, Charlene, if you want to add anything more to this data piece, and then I'll give you a heads up. I'm going to ask a question about collaboration between pre-K and K as the next question. But Charlene, anything more to add on the data piece?
Yeah, just to add, you're talking about what are the data points you need to collect. And I think we have an opportunity with our research collaborative. As we're building programs, we have researchers who are at the table. And so they're helping us to figure out what are those questions, what is the design of the program, and what are those questions that we should be asking. So it's another way when we talk about return on investment and looking at the efficacy of programming to be able to have that conversation as you're building the programming as well. And so that's another way I think that we can start working to figure out what works and to be able to tell that story.
Fabulous. And I appreciate that sometimes research institutions may be seen as less biased than the folks who are implementing programs. So it gives them a certain value. Dr. Lucero, because you were starting to bring this up, another question was asking about the connection between preschool and kindergarten, and whether there's collaboration that needs to happen, especially given the extraordinary levels of kindergarten chronic absence that are happening.
Yeah, so we do. We felt that it was really necessary to develop a collaborative within our city, that the Sanford Public Schools has a relationship, and we work regularly with our pre-K and daycare programs, both private and public. And the really good thing about that is that we meet on a monthly basis and we talk about concerns that are out there. And one of the things that our data was telling us is that there was not good SRBI at our pre-K level, that they would have an issue sometimes related to behavior. And one of their interventions was, you can't come back to our program. And that's not a good intervention, right? And so we started to do some work with our pre-K programs to say, hey, let us provide you with some support. Let us provide you and your teachers with some professional development. And if you really struggle and you get to the point that that student is not really making it in your environment, let us work with you to either find an alternative environment or let us take them ourselves. So these are all of the things, because we're having those regular conversations. Before, that student would have just ended up at home and waited until kindergarten to end up with us. The other thing that I think is—
Before you go,
oh, I'm sorry.
If you just define what SRBI is.
I'm sorry. Scientifically based research intervention. So we need to be able to give early and often intervention to our students, and they need to be very specific for that particular student. And that's not something that all of our pre-K teachers understood. And so giving them the opportunity for us to be there on the ground, and we have actually even pushed teachers into certain pre-K programs that produce the most amount of students who come to Sanford Public Schools. They are there every day working with their teachers, because we know that an investment in that program will produce students who are better ready for kindergarten when they enter Sanford Public Schools. So it truly is a community problem that we're trying to solve, not just a Sanford Public Schools problem when they enter kindergarten.
And I'd be curious to both Carey and Charlene, as from the state level, what is it that states could do, or you've been able to do, to promote that collaboration between pre-K and kindergarten?
Well, a couple of things. Number one, we opened up all of our professional development for free to anybody in the state that touches 3 and 4-year-olds. So whether public or private. So whenever we advertise that, we let everybody know they can come and know exactly what's expected of children coming into kindergarten. We've also designed transition plans so that the students coming out of pre-K, there's a set of pieces of information that they put together to pass off to the kindergarten teacher. We encourage them to meet with the kindergarten teachers so that they actually can do that. And the same thing in kindergarten, moving into 1st grade, there's a transition plan for that. And I think that the more information that we can give them about what's expected of little ones that's developmentally appropriate, even our coaches, because I use our data on the kindergarten readiness to know where the programs are the weakest, and then deploy our coaches to those programs to try to build the capacity of those teachers that are already working with 4-year-olds. So, because sometimes they may not have had that experience. And I know when we started the collaboratives, that was really an issue, even from the directors. They really didn't know what was expected. And so we spent a lot of time working with them about what is developmentally appropriate practice, what should you be doing in your programs. And so we've tried to go at it from a number of different ways so that they're feeling a comfort level that their program is aligned to what we were expecting in kindergarten and then on into K-12.
And I would add, as the Commissioner of Education here, working very close with the Commissioner of the Office of Early Childhood, so that we're constantly in communication about efforts that are aligned, or efforts that could be misaligned, that we really certainly want to bring back into alignment. And it's from everything. You know, when we were doing COVID guidance, we were making sure that we were together in that same space because we had pre-K programs co-located in school buildings, and what does that guidance need to look like? So we've modeled that and continue to have those conversations with each other as for all the reasons that you've talked about here. We've done videos together on transition, so we try to make sure that folks are seeing us together and that transitions are really very important.
Well, thank you so much. This has been an incredibly rich conversation. So appreciate everything that everyone has offered from both the perspective of the two states, and then Melissa, your amazing ability to kind of bring it all together in a framework that helps us see how this connects, relates, and offers guidance to other places. It is actually my pleasure to segue us into the next part of today's session. I know that the Campaign for Grade Level Reading will not ever let you go, Carey Wright. You might not be presenting in the future as the state superintendent of Mississippi, but having now known Ralph for, I don't know, 25 years, I've seen his tenacity once he finds an amazing leader and visionary. And so I anticipate that we will continue to hear from you, but I also know that Ralph wanted to, and the campaign wanted to spend a little time honoring your leadership. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Ralph Smith, the Managing Director of the Campaign for Grade Level Reading.
Well, thank you, Hetty. And as usual, you're absolutely correct. Dr. Wright may be retiring from Mississippi, but there's no retirement plan from the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. We just don't allow it. Carey, I regret so much missing what I know was a bittersweet celebration last week. Yeah. And I was delighted that Dr. Angela Rutherford, who has led our work in Mississippi for a decade, that she was there representing the campaign, and I know that we were well represented. But I did not want this moment to pass without saying personally to you how much we have appreciated your leadership, your courage, your vision, your insight, your passion about all things having to do with kids learning, and your special compassion for those who are most at risk. I wanted you to know that we have seen that it is possible in a state that is supposedly and is really conservative, led by governors who are avowed conservative. It is possible for good leadership to prevail and to have 2 consecutive conservative governors singing your praises, regretting that you're leaving their state, and really grateful for the leadership you've provided. You have, in your relationship in that state, you have given people across the country an opportunity to see that educating kids is neither red nor blue nor purple. It is all of the above, and it is possible for professionals with your qualities and your qualifications to do that. And that is why I want Angela Rutherford to do here and to say here what she said on behalf of the Campaign for Grade Level Reading just a week ago. Angela?
Yes, it is my pleasure to do this again, even though I held it together during the retirement reception on June 16th. I'm trying really hard here to do the same. So I'll read the commendation. This was presented to Dr. Wright last Thursday at her retirement reception. Dr. Carey Wright's distinguished career brought her to Mississippi in 2013 as the right person in the right position at the right time. As Superintendent of Education, Dr. Wright seized upon the opportunity presented by the enactment of 2 state laws to improve the teaching and overall effectiveness of Mississippi's teachers, school leaders, and schools. The resulting progress in the academic performance of Mississippi students has earned it widespread recognition and high regard from other state and local educators. A few of the many that Ralph chose and I chose and others to include. In 2015, the National Institute for Early Education Research first recognized Mississippi as one of only 5 states in the nation to meet all 10 quality standards for early education. This distinction remains. In 2019, the NAEP reported that Mississippi's 4th graders scored higher than the nation's public school average in mathematics, tied the nation in reading, and ranked #1 in the nation for making the largest score gains in both subjects. Quality Counts ranked Mississippi #2 in the nation for improvement in 2019, 2020, and 2021. In 2019, the U.S. Secretary of Education appointed Dr. Wright to the National Assessment Governing Board, which sets policy for NAEP. And in 2002, Dr. Wright earned the Mississippi Top 50 Most Influential Leaders Award. In recognition of her path-breaking work and leadership, and with deep appreciation for her contribution as thought and action leader, role model, and ardent ambassador, we proudly designate Dr. Carey Wright as a 2022 Champion of Grade Level Reading. Signed, Ralph Smith, Managing Director.
Well, I got to tell you, it was such an honor to receive this, Ralph. And I was sorry that you weren't there because we have been kind of attached at the hip for the past few years. But it's such an honor to be recognized for this. And I've said before, there's so many people to thank behind this work. You know, Glenn East is here representing Gulfport. He's a state board member, but he's also been an incredible partner. And when I look at across the state, you can't do this work by yourself. You can, kind of guide this work and push this forward. But it takes a lot of people believing in our children, believing in all children, not just some, that they have the capability of performing at very high levels and then setting those expectations. And sure enough, that's what's happened. And it is a tough decision for me. As I said earlier, when I was speaking last week, both my daughters live in Maryland. I've got a grandson now who's turning 3, and it's just hard to be away from them. This has been 8.5 years. And so I figured it's time to hand this baton to the next person to lead this work. And the beauty of it is Mississippi is ranked 35th. And as I told the governor when I met with him 2 weeks ago, there's 34 slots above us, and we just need to keep working to move our way continually up. Because it's all about improvement, but more importantly, it's all about improving the outcomes for children. And that's what I think I'm most proud about. But thank you, Ralph, so much.
Well, we can't begin to thank you enough. And you know that, and you know me long enough to know that thank you has much less to do with what you've done and is really anticipatory in nature, looking forward to what comes next. But Carey, you ought to know that when I intervened and took a little bit of this program from Ed.D and my good friend and your fellow chief, Charlene Russell Tucker, we apologetically said to Charlene that we were gonna steal a few minutes. And Charlene, of course, unsurprisingly said, if you're going to be talking about our chief, I want an opportunity and would be delighted to say a few words. And we were really pleased. Charlene, I am so pleased that we had this program today with 2 outstanding chiefs. And let me ask you to close it down.
Ralph, thank you so very much. It's great to see you. And I was thinking back, Carey, at the time, I think Hetty was the one who probably connected us first to work on issues of attendance. And I could always know when Hetty was putting something together and she's talking about it, you were there. And so we spent a lot of time back and forth, just learning from you. I certainly was in different positions at the time, but certainly was always just impressed with your steadfast leadership. And I'm going to join Ralph because as I listened to your presentation and knowing we're creating a dyslexia center here, and I see the training that you're doing, and so the residency program. So certainly we'll be tapping in to find out what you're doing there, and I'm sure we will all benefit from your continued expertise and just support of this work. You have leaders, and the leaders come, leaders go. Those that endure and have a lasting legacy are those passionate and committed, and that's what I've seen in you. And so, as I'm new in this spot in the commissioner role, could only hope that just the level of passion and commitment that you show is one that I also see as an example in the work forward. So thank you very much for all that you do and for what you continue to do and for a lasting legacy of leadership in education. Thank you
so much. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Charlene. Thank you, Carey. And Hetty, thank you for letting us change your well-crafted plan for a great session.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Wishing you a fabulous afternoon. The leadership in this room is what will keep me inspired. So here's to keeping moving forward. And please fill out the form, the poll before you leave if you have a chance, as the campaign continues to grow and learn from the feedback it gets on every one of its webinars.
And Hetty, as we close out, I'm just going to say, please, thanks to all of our panelists and to you, Hetty, for moderating. And please take advantage of our upcoming webinars and join us for those, as well as plan to join us for GLR week. We'll look forward to seeing you over the next few weeks. July is going to be very busy, so we'll look forward to having you be part of one or all of the upcoming sessions. Thank you all for joining today. And Sierra, thanks for doing all of the work in the background. Take good care, everyone.